Mack Weldon, it is better than what you're wearing right now. As you know, if you've been listening to the podcast, I am a fan of Mack Weldon primarily because it has super fancy antimicrobial. I'm going to get that right one of these days, but anyway, it doesn't stink. That is the magic of Mack Weldon underwear. Their special line of silver underwear, which is what I make my husband wear. Basically, like a lot of the advertisers that I have these days are involved in making my marriage a little bit happier, and that's the way that Mack Weldon does it. They believe in smart design, premium fabrics, and simple shopping. Mack Weldon will be the most comfortable underwear, socks, shirts, undershirts, hoodies, and sweatpants, and more that you will ever wear. And not only does Mack Weldon's underwear, socks, and shirts look good, they perform well too. They're good for going out, going to work, going out on dates, or just everyday life, which quite frankly is how my husband uses his Mack Weldon stuff. It's his like couch gear primarily. I wish it was more going out stuff. Maybe another sponsor will take over the task of getting that part of my relationship in order. But go to MackWeldon.com and get 20% off using promo code FRIENDS. Again, Mack Weldon, it is better than whatever you're wearing right now. And you can go to MackWeldon.com and get 20% off using promo code FRIENDS. Hey, it's Anna Marie Cox. Welcome to With Friends Like These, one of the family of Crooked Media podcasts, which you probably already subscribe to, but you should start subscribing if you haven't to Pod Save America, Pod Save the World, and the annoyingly addictive Love It or Leave It, which describes both the show and John and the theme song. Almost anything Love It is annoyingly addictive. Just kidding. He, of course, is a straight shooter loved by all sides. Today's show is with Tom Frank, who is a genuine friend of the pod. Tom and I have known each other for, I guess it's over 20 years now. He was in Minneapolis to do a reading from his book, Listen Liberal, so I had him actually into the studio, which made the conversation more digressive and a little more animated than usual. And to be frank, a little less awkward. But I promise you we'll make up for that lack of awkwardness in episodes to come. For now, though, here is my conversation with Tom. Tom Frank, one of my oldest friends, and by that I mean both literally and...
figuratively?
Both.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
I mean, like, we go back a long way and you're old.
Oh. That is harsh.
Harsh realm.
Yeah. Harsh realm.
Just the other day on Twitter, someone was talking.
I use that phrase all the time, by the way.
I do. I don't say the ones that didn't
wax slacks. Swinging on the flippity flop.
Swinging on the flippity flop. What is it? Lame stain. Lame stain.
I use that all the time.
Lame stain.
But harsh realm. That is a genius phrase.
It is. It was actually like it turned into like almost a real thing. And for people who don't know what we're talking about, who are not old like us, one of the very first things I remember about you, Tom, was the great grunge hoax of
which I had a very small hand in. It was 92.
92.
Yeah. And I had a very small hand in that, not in formulating the hoax or actually perpetrating the hoax, but in the sort of aftermath. I wrote about it, and that was some funny stuff.
And the New York Times got mad.
They got mad. Well, the hoax had been played on them,
right?
And they didn't like. It was like I was the messenger, and they sort of classic.
Shoot the messenger, man.
Exactly.
That's why you can't get your ideas in the New York Times, and because like they're still pissed about the great grunge.
We're not going to talk about that.
Oh yeah, no, because
frankly, Anna, I can't get my ideas in anything anymore. But that's coming to an end, I hope. But for like the last couple of years, I've only written for foreign publications. So
yeah, well, that's unfortunate because we should talk about your ideas. So you are the author
Such as they are.
You're the author of Listen Liberal most recently,
of
a bunch of books before that. One of the organizing theses of American political conversation, What's the Matter with Kansas?
Yeah.
You know what? I actually kind of want to ask you, like, that idea like took hold with such force.
Well,
it's still
you say that idea,
people...
but it's the first page of the book is what took hold. People don't read the. Well, I don't want to. I shouldn't. I don't want to be mean about it.
Everyone who says that, no, there's no way that everyone who talks about What's the Matter with Kansas read the book, or else you would be fabulously wealthy, and you would probably like be in the New York Times on a regular basis. But
I don't know about that, because the book has, it starts out, What's the Matter with Kansas starts out on the very first page saying, look at this weird thing that working class people voting for Republicans. Isn't this weird? And by the end of the book, you're like, yeah, this is happening and nothing strange about it. Well, I mean, it's strange. It's in a historical sense, this is a huge reversal and an inversion and all that stuff. But by the end of the book, I have done my best to explain why. And people often remember the question, look at how weird this is, what's going on here, and don't remember the answer.
I don't know. I actually think that the answer, maybe to a slightly more rarefied group of people, like wonkier, nerdier political science types, the answer to the question, which is that, working class people in the Midwest and elsewhere vote for conservatives against their economic interests because they've been pandered to via social issues.
Yeah,
that's like the
culture wars, and
that's sort of the second level.
The thing is that it's that class gets articulated in all of these weird ways that are not economic, and culture wars is so. The insight was that the culture wars are, every single one of them is in some way a concealed way of talking about class, which is really weird, but is true.
And in fact, that sort of brings us right up to the current moment.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of ways, like Listen Liberal is like a sequel.
Yes, it is. It begins with the last chapter of What's the Matter with Kansas, the part that nobody reads about Bill Clinton. I sort of blame the Democrats for their own, for their own defeat, and then I just pick right up with that here, 12 years later. And,
sort of like if What's the Matter Kansas is about the way that the right has used culture war language and tropes to, I don't want to use the word manipulate white working class voters, because that sounds...
I think there is a lot of manipulation, though. I mean, because this is not earnest. It's not heartfelt. A lot of it is. I mean, there's a lot of PR people and yes, manipulation.
I wanted to give them a little bit of agency, but
yeah.
Okay,
that is true too. I mean,
they're making these choices on their own.
Yes,
like they're not like being brainwashed. That's the thing. Is like I think some people do.
There is that
there's a lot of salesmanship going on.
The loudspeaker going on every after. Yes,
there's salesmanship happening,
yeah.
And but they're making the choice to buy, right? So if What's the Matter with Kansas is about how the right uses culture war language, tropes, et cetera, to manipulate or sell, against their self-interest ideas to white working class, then Listen Liberal is about how the Democrats have been like, okay, do that.
Yeah, walk away.
Has been like,
wow, we can't figure out how that's happening.
It's been about the Democrats basically saying, giving up for not just shrugging their shoulders and walking away, but making a conscious choice.
Yeah.
And
that's important too when you talk about agency, that this was a conscious choice over the decades. And I think that's one of the startling things about Listen Liberal is how open the Democrats have been about making the choice to walk away from working class issues. And they I was going to say they talk a good game at election year, but they didn't this time. They didn't really even try. And but they have more or less openly just said, the hell with this.
And do you want to lay out your thesis even a little bit more? Because I want to talk about it, and I want to talk about whether or not it. I mean, there's a lot of reason to think that your thesis in Listen Liberal kind of explains Donald Trump, right?
Yeah. Well, although I wrote it without knowing that he was going to be the Republican nominee or what he would do. I mean, I wrote it well in advance, but yeah, it's kind of uncanny. That the whole, one of the many ways of interpreting the argument is that by becoming the party of affluent white-collar professionals, the kind of people we used to live among in Washington, D.C., they have opened themselves, they're wide open for a populist, for the populist attack, and it gets worse every 4 years. And here it comes with Trump. I, of course, didn't see that coming. But here it comes, and boom, look what happened.
Now, even with having written the book, that's actually interesting to me. Even having written the book and talked about the ways in which liberals and Democrats have walked away from the working class, you still thought, I still
thought that Hillary would win?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's because I thought that because I thought Hillary was a weak candidate, but I thought Trump was a train wreck candidate. I mean, all the different scandals and blunders. And look, the bottom line is, I believe the polls. I always do. I mean, this is, I am a member of the class that I criticize. I am a guy who reads the newspapers and believes what he reads, And I look at 538.com and I'm like, yeah, whatever. That said, Anna, one of the most amazing or interesting or crazy things that happened to me in this last go-round was about a week and a half before the election, the Guardian called me up and said, we want you to write the Trump wins story. And I said, but Trump's not going to win. And they said, well, he has a good chance. And I said, okay. And I went out and I read, and I dug down in the polls. This is a week before the election. And I watched a whole lot of Trump rallies on YouTube. And I persuaded myself that they were right, that he did have a very good chance. And in fact, in order to write the story, I had to persuade myself that he was going to win. And I wrote that story. And that story appeared 10 minutes after the AP called the election for Trump. And it's one of the meanest, I shouldn't say meanest, it's one of the best articles I've ever written. I mean, I was so angry. I mean, so imagine this is a week before the election, and I had to put myself in the mood that the rest of the country was in the day after the election. And I succeeded in doing this and wrote, and I'm still very proud of this article. So, it's an amazing thing. And then I had to somehow detoxify myself with washing myself with bourbon,
You've always been a really fast writer, but I have to say, even I was even thought that was rather extraordinary.
Oh, you saw it? Yeah, when it got it. Yeah. Well, of course I wrote it in advance. I didn't write it on election night. No, I wrote it well in advance.
Yeah.
I mean, it was highly polished. It had links to everything. You remember it was a well-crafted essay.
I mean, I did suspect perhaps that you had done some of it, but in advance. But you are also a very fast writer. I was actually thinking,
no one's that fast.
I don't want to do too much reminiscing because that would be boring for probably everyone but us. But when I went to see you speak last night, something about you that has changed. You used to throw your papers on the floor when you got done.
I used to be very bitter and angry. My glasses have changed. Have you noticed that?
Your glasses.
I lost my those little round glasses that I always wore. They're like World War II Army issue glasses.
You don't dress like a 1930s businessman anymore either.
Well. Okay, true that, but I left the glasses in the Dallas Fort Worth airport the other day. I was on a flight back from Perth, Australia, and they routed me. Oh my God! You got to understand, I was on planes for 48 hours, and somewhere along the line, I lost my signature glasses, and I had to go to one of those, get your glasses in an hour place. It's what I have now. Yeah, I look like Woody Allen in the 70s.
So you still wore those? That's amazing. I actually assumed that these current glasses were
No, this is a terrible. I mean, they don't make those anymore. The World War II.
But you used to dress like a 1930s businessman, basically in costume.
Yeah.
I think you all your clothes were thrifted. Right?
That's still the case. Yeah.
Yes. And then I think from doing policy debate in high school, you had this tick of when you would read, you would finish
the papers on the floor.
You would finish reading a page, you would throw the paper on the floor.
I was much more aggressive and angry, and you might have noticed something else about my speaking style now, which is I'm a much nicer person. Yes, I am.
I guess time mellows us all.
Yeah, and I take my time. And another problem with throwing the pages on the floor, they get dirty. And people step on them and they pick up dirt, and then and I'm on a book tour. This is like the book tour to end all book tours. It's going on and on and on. Oh, you're taking a phone call while we're on the air?
There's one thing that we're not on the air, but that'll probably go into the tape. And also that was it was important, but I didn't take it.
So I have to give the same talk again and again and again, so I can't throw the papers on the floor anymore.
Yeah, you're a professional.
Well.
Yeah, you're a member of the professional class. That was my favorite question to you last night, and I want to get into that in a little bit, which is how do you demonize and critique a class that you are?
And I'm a member of.
Very fully a member of.
Yeah. Well, very fully. No, I'm a second. What would you call it? Second tier or third tier member of. I mean, I have the degrees, mm-hmm. right? I have the formal elements of it, but I'm not one of these. You lived in Washington. These mm-hmm. people on top, the winners. That's what I'm not that.
Yeah, I'm not a winner either. Neither of us are winners. Like, we would have different lives if we were winners. We wouldn't be recording a podcast in a closet if we were winners. So let's get back to your thesis, because I want to talk a little bit more about the professional.
I also used to drink 40 ounces.
That's right.
And as I spoke back in the day, I don't do that anymore either. There's been a lot of reforms.
Well, I was going to say there was a lot of performative aspects to your persona back in the day.
Yeah, no, I still do some performative stuff, but that cuts, the 40 ounces cut into the performance. They actually.
Yeah, they detract some time from your ability to continue the performance.
Well, you can't go on for 2.5 hours with it if you're like swigging at a Colt 45 or whatever that is. You know. And it was always the most wretched brands. I would always choose the lowest end.
Yep. Yes, these are all things that I remember. You also served me my first martini. Actually.
Did I?
Yeah.
But that was back before that was cool. Do you remember when the martini craze happened, when it started? And I was like, damn. Now I can't do that anymore.
Yep. Like there was this like very, again, like you had this, you and your pals in the Pluto Schloss.
Yes. You remember that house on 48th Street in Chicago.
Yep.
And I went back there recently, and it belonged to a professor. He was a great guy, and he rented out half of the house to us, to me and my friends. And we had a lot of fun there. And it was what you might expect, like 4 college kids and grad students living in a house to look like. It was a wreck.
Yes. It was a wreck.
It was a wreck, but it was from the 1880s, and it had several wonderful features. One of them, it had a full-length bathtub. I don't think I've ever seen that before or since. You could like lie down all the way in this bathtub. Anyhow, but this house, I went back there recently. That house is this setting for a lot of fond memories. You know, we did the Baffler magazine there. We had a lot of fun in that house, and I went back there recently, and it belongs to a real, honest-to-God billionaire, I believe. I mean, it was it had been a mansion in the 1880s, had fallen into this sort of state of disrepair.
To the point where you could afford it, right? Exactly.
To the point where someone like me could live in it. And now it has been sort of recalled back into the realm of wealth. And it's surrounded by a security perimeter, a fence, and those conifers that grow really fast. What do you call them? And so you can't see it anymore.
Conifers that grow really fast.
You can't see it anymore. Anyhow,
well, that isn't a metaphor for lost youth.
That's Hyde Park also. That's that neighborhood in Chicago. The whole place is like that now. I took my daughter there with me. I guess we can say this is on a podcast. I never like to talk about my family on these things, but you know my family. So.
I do.
And she was born there. And but we moved away when she was 2.
Not in the house.
Not in the house, but in Hyde Park, in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And we moved away when she was 2, so her memories of it are very, very dim. But we were walking around, and it's, like I said, used to be this kind of student quarter, kind of run down, kind of bedraggled, and now is very spiffy. It's beyond spiffy. It's really nice.
Yeah.
And we're walking around this neighborhood, and she says to me, "Daddy, why did we ever leave this place?"
She has good taste.
Yeah.
And refined taste, probably from living in D.C., huh?
Yes, and that's exactly it. And we live in what I consider to be a pretty nice place now, Mm-hmm. Anyhow.
So I've been talking to Tom Frank, who is an actual genuine friend of mine, here on With Friends Like These. We're going to take a short break and be right back, and maybe we'll actually stick to a subject.
Talk about a book?
We could talk about a book.
You're listening to With Friends Like These with Anna Marie Cox.
These days, you can get practically everything on demand. In fact, I cannot think of a single thing that you can't get on demand. There isn't an app for, except perhaps, of course, like genuine emotion and love. But you can get my podcast on demand, and you can get stamps on demand, which maybe you could use to write someone to generate some of that not quite on-demand emotion and relationships. But why are you going to the post office? Unless, of course, that's where you might meet someone who then you would later mail a letter to using postage that you got from Stamps.com. And anything you can do at the post office, you can now do right from your desk with Stamps.com, except, of course, meet someone, but you're going to meet them and then come back home and use Stamp.com. And you can buy and print official U.S. postage for any letter or package using your own computer and printer. And unlike the post office, Stamps.com never closes, so you can get postage whenever you need it, 24/7. It is actually really convenient. And if you're not in, the market for meeting someone while standing in line, which maybe isn't even the best way, I don't know, to meet somebody. But Stamps.com is great. The post office, probably not the best place to meet people anyway. And, you want to be able to do things on demand. That you can get postage for stamps, letters, postcards. If you say want to mail your representative or the president, any one of the presidents we currently have, Jared, Mike Pence, or the one who, appears at the podium with president at the title, you can use Stamps.com. And if you use my code, FRIENDS, you get a special offer. 4-week trial, and that includes postage and a digital scale. Go to Stamps.com. Before you do anything else, click the radio microphone at the top of the homepage and use the promo code FRIENDS. That's Stamps.com, enter FRIENDS. Stamps.com, never go to the post office again. I was actually thinking about making you do my ad reads with me.
Oh, no.
I know.
Come on, you can't do that.
Because
I get paid for doing that.
Well, I would get paid. I'd just be like dragging you into like
to humiliate me.
Yeah, and also because
no way, you got to do that yourself later. You got to carry that burden yourself.
Because the punk rock version of you and I would not have done this at all.
Of course not.
Every time
I still don't do ads. Come on.
And every time I do these ads, which of course my sponsors are fantastic, and everyone should buy from them and use the promo code from this show to do those things.
Oh God.
I always want to add, but property is theft.
You heard it from Anna.
Also, nothing about capitalism will fill your soul.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
That's
right.
Wait,
not even Pepsi's new Soul Fill? Just one swig of that, and you were like humming on your way,
God, you and
down the highway to soulfulness.
You and I spent years and years railing against shit. Commodification of dissent.
Yeah, but now, it's funny because it feels both like a long time ago and something that's not that important. It was so important to us at the time. But it just feels like there's so many bigger problems now.
Right. I remember getting into screaming fights about, Matador selling out half of its.
Yeah.
How much did they sell? It was like,
I don't know. That wasn't with me. That was, I know the kind of argument you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, we had
Matador sold at 49% of its stake, or some small percentage of its stake to Capitol Records, and having it not.
You got to put this in context. Yeah. This is in the early 90s. We thought things like that, music, were so incredibly important, and we thought it was important to that it not be commercial, and on and on and on. And now we're in the age of Spotify. It's like the neutron bomb has been dropped on all our musician friends.
Yeah, although they also mean it's just a different economy. It's just a completely different economy.
I know, and look, I remember when those arguments were happening, and that was sort of when I started to give up on that particular line of argument and become more political, more like partisan political. And I remember it was a lot of the deeds of the Clinton administration that really did it for me, that made me so mad. I remember the day that welfare reform happened, and I was in Hyde Park, and I was so angry at Bill Clinton, and I swore to never vote for another Clinton. I broke my vow this year, by the way. Last year, I voted for Hillary.
Did you have a suspicion that Hillary would be running, or were you thinking about Chelsea? What was the never vote for another Clinton? How did you have the insight to go broadly?
Of course, what I meant by that was that part of the party, that faction,
All right.
They made me so angry. That bank deregulation, telecom deregulation, which was a huge deal to me at the time, and now it seems like a minor disaster compared to all the other things, the things that went later.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about those arguments that we had, and I just remember them. I'm having this sudden vision of the tower where HPK was.
Yeah,
and.
This is the college radio station we worked at.
Yeah, and getting into these arguments with people about...
Oh, my God. And ferocious, vicious, mean arguments.
People would, you would lose friends. You would lose friends
yes.
over, I think that they shouldn't have recorded that record for a major label.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I was, of course, one of those people who we all felt that to a certain degree, but it just, all of these things, it got taken too far. It's funny, that was you read about,
for the record, I was on the side of, if they need to make money, I wish them well. Yeah. And what I was against was...
Oh, my God, yes, well, of course.
What I was against was the exploitation stuff,
yeah.
which is what Steve Albini wrote about in
Yeah.
Famously
but it's funny
reprinted in the Baffler, What's the Matter with Music?
Yeah, and now, What's the Matter with Music is so much more...
Yeah. But anyway, so we'd have these fights, and I'm trying to remember what my transition was, because people ask me all the time about, you remember, I wrote about politics, but also mainly wrote about culture.
Yeah, well, we all did.
Yeah.
That was so important. It is hard to imagine now how important music was to us. By the way, and I drive around, I'm on this Midwestern book tour, going to many, many, many cities. And as I drive around in the car, I'm listening to, of course, some music from that era because I've never really advanced beyond that. In fact, I'm advancing the other direction. If there's anything new I'm listening to, it's like jazz from
when
the
you advance
from the
in the other
20s.
direction, that's called regression.
Yeah, well, it's new for me, but
Oh, I always say it's always like 1992 in my car. Like, I mean,
Yes.
that was like a
that's
peak.
about right. That's about right.
That was a fantastic year for music, and like it was like I can tell you all the albums from that year that I love and still. listen
I
to.
know. No, that was, but that was
Betty Severe, Liz
Yes,
Phair, like
yes.
the Pavement EPs from that
yes,
year.
those are great, and I still listen to those on vinyl. But now I have Spotify, which is doing such incredible damage to the livelihood of musicians. But it's wonderful in certain respects. So, for example, all the Stooges bootlegs are on Spotify. So I listen to these as I drive around. Iggy Pop from like the 70s. What the hell is it doing on here? Well, it's there. And here's another really interesting thing. So I liked jazz when we were in college radio, but you couldn't just listen to Coltrane if you wanted. The records were very rare.
Yeah.
And you couldn't just go out and get them. There's a scarcity aspect to it.
Yes, but Rick Perlstein used to argue jazz was the real punk.
Yeah. And now
Our classmate Rick Perlstein.
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
So also,
by the way, has he been on this podcast?
He has not been, but
he will be.
Yes, he will be.
Author
Author of
the
Nixon
scarcity,
Land, and what's the other big one?
the book about Goldwater. What was that called?
Before the Storm?
Yes,
After the Storm.
excellent book.
One of those two.
Book. Before the Storm.
Before the Storm, yeah.
Yeah, but the scarcity aspect has been it's gone. So there's this book that I had back when we were in college radio. It was by Gunther Schuller, and it was a history of swing music. And I mean, it was detailed. And he like transcribes like saxophone solos on the page so that you can look at it, and you can try to understand how awesome, the solo is. But frankly, you read this book and it doesn't mean anything because you can't listen to the records. They're incredibly rare. Well, here's the thing. They aren't anymore. So I'm now rereading this book, and he writes about a such and such, Joe Blow playing a solo on this, session in 1928, and you're like, you go to Spotify and ding a ding a ding a ding, there it is. Yeah, and you can just listen to it now. It blows my mind.
And I don't want to get I really do want to talk about politics. But
yeah, that's right. We're here to talk about politics.
But also, it's entirely changed electronic music and music
Yeah.
mixing as well. My current husband, who you need to meet, is a electronic music dude. And like, there's crate digging still, but a lot of that crate digging happens online. It's like it's completely changed
right?
who can do electronic music.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well,
but let's talk about so a couple of things. One thing is I'm interested in how you talked a little bit how you sort of transitioned from these very passionate arguments about culture into arguments about politics.
the conquest of cool.
Yeah.
Remember about advertising in the 60s?
Yes, we were in the same reading
And
group
then
with Dr. Neil Harris.
That's right. And then the next book of mine was called One Market Under God, and I was bringing that thesis up to date in 1999. So it was about the dot-com bubble and the sort of emerging, new economy. And I don't know if you remember, but I read every management theory book I could get my hands on at the thrift store, and I had this stack of them like 6 feet high in my
How
house.
come you're not a business titan now? Like, how come you're not?
And then, but that trend that led me straight into What's the Matter with Kansas. It was really, really interesting how that went. But I went from that was a book about management theory, and it led weirdly to this other question, which is what the hell happened to the working class? Mm-hmm. You've got these business people dreaming of world conquest in the 90s. That sort of insane business culture climate of the time, and I was criticizing that. That was my subject. And then they're stealing all this imagery from unions and from the 30s and presenting themselves. Remember, I coined the phrase market populism. Mm-hmm. That's what they were doing. And so then I'm like, well, where's the real deal? Where's the real populists? And where's my homies from Kansas? And lo and behold, at that very moment, they were engaged in this fight over the theory of evolution.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, that's what's happened to them.
And you always talk about you're from Kansas, and I don't know if you talk about this as much as you used to, but you were a young conservative in Kansas.
That is very true, yes. And I got over it pretty quickly once I went to college, but I was very conservative. But that was largely because I didn't understand the world, and I saw the world in theoretical terms when I was young. I mean, I still do to a certain degree, but I now acknowledge fact. unlike our president. But I acknowledge fact. And at the time, I wanted to see the world as will and idea, and free market theory, among other things, is a very comforting and persuasive theory. If you look at it just as a theory, it's moral. It has a beginning and an end. Everything has its place. It can explain everything. It is a really persuasive system, as long as you don't take reality into account.
Right. In some ways, it's actually like the grandest of all conspiracy theories, right? Like, because it implies like there is an organization in the world. Not like a singular organization. A
spontaneous organization, like nature. It's organic.
Right.
And it makes sense. And life makes sense. And everything unfolds according to its, proper meaning and all. And this was very convincing to me when I was a kid in high school.
And so you went to college. What happened in college that,
reality. Well, no.
That doesn't mean I'm just
reality,
saying,
No, a bunch of different things. One of them was summer jobs that I did, where I was a typist, and I was very poorly paid, and it made me mad. And another was reading books and realizing how broad human experience was, and how there were thousands of things undreamt of in the free market philosophy that couldn't be explained, didn't fit, didn't have any place. You want to hear an anecdote?
I'm always up for a good anecdote.
I went to the University of Kansas for 1 year, and I transferred out of there. But one of the things that I remember very vividly there is walking around in the library, this wonderful OpenStax library, and I came across a whole shelf of books, all with the same title, and the title was "The Populist Revolt." And this is a famous book in the 30s. Of the history of the populist movement in the 1890s, published in the 30s, and obviously had once been a textbook at the University of Kansas and wasn't anymore. And I'd never heard of this before, and I pulled it down and started reading it, and lo and behold, it was about Kansas. And he's like, I didn't know any of this stuff. And it's kind of the allure of a secret history, but also finding the code. Populism is the sort of code for understanding Kansas. Now, there's no monuments to the populist movement in Kansas, and I had never heard of it.
Except for the man who built the sculpture garden.
Yes, the sculpture garden. I hope we'll get to that at some point. But that was somebody built that on their own. Right. There's no public monument.
There is a populist. There's a monument to populism that is a privately created sculpture garden that we may talk about. We may not get to.
But it's out in the middle of nowhere, and it's really interesting. It's anyhow.
But there's no public monuments to populism in Kansas.
And they don't teach it in high school. You don't. And by the way, and when
there's
I was
a lot they don't teach in Kansas high schools, actually.
But when I was in elementary school, the Kansas schools were pretty good back then, and that Kansas was very proud of its schools, and they did teach you Kansas history. This is very important to them. We are not those people from Missouri. We're John Brown's people. We are not those slaveholders from Missouri who are coming over and burning down Lawrence, Kansas. All that was very important to them, but populism was not. It was never even mentioned. Okay, so I discovered this, and I felt like I had discovered this secret history, and I still think that that's true to some degree, because the populist style still is, and the mindset and the anti-elitism and the hatred of banks and the East Coast and, people on top, hierarchy, that is still deep in the grain in Kansas and in Minnesota and in Iowa, where I'm going later today, and in all of these plain states and in a lot of the southern states as well. It's very much in the air they breathe. The problem, or the interesting thing, is that the radical side to it has disappeared. Now, you still have some of that here in Minnesota, or in a place like
Democrat Farm Labor Party.
Yeah, or in North Dakota, you see elements of that, or in Wisconsin. But by and large, the whole populist style has gone over to the right in a really interesting way.
Yeah, the idea that populism would mean that the people own things.
Yeah, what? I hadn't thought of that angle, huh?
I know. It's like the part that's really missing from Trump's populism, right?
Yeah,
is like what was actually kind of a key
or that the people have some right to regulate business enterprise, which just in the 19th century seemed like, duh, that's like a no-brainer. And today is like, what? It's like so foreign to people.
And that the accurate measure of things was also an important government duty.
Yeah.
I read like an anecdote about Francis Perkins, recently, who I wanted to mention last night when you were talking about the brain trust.
Yeah, Roosevelt's
brain
team
trust.
of outsiders.
Team of outsiders. That she was a social worker and labor organizer.
Yes.
Prior to being
Yes,
labor
she
secretary.
belongs on my list. Yeah.
Imagine someone, even a Democrat, appointing a labor organizer to the cabinet.
Right. But what if we would have had, you'd
today.
be talking about a very different last 8 years.
Right.
Had Obama followed that sort of the sort of Roosevelt path with regards to appointments.
But the anecdote about her, I believe, I don't want to mess it. I don't remember it that clearly. But
You're gonna mess it up.
I'm going to mess it up. But it had to do with her seeing the job statistics quoted by Herbert Hoover and her being like, I know those aren't right.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do this other kinds of measures of job creation.
Oh, that's awesome. So she's responsible for that. Because
Yeah.
all of the economic measurement goes back to that period, the New Deal. That's when they started doing accurate measurement of the economy. There's basically, if you want to understand what happened before then, you basically have to make up your own metrics, like Thomas Piketty. You know about this?
Yeah.
He wants to measure the 19th century. It's very hard to do.
Yeah, we're keeping great records for one thing, and the other thing is that there aren't
there's
standardized
no income
measures.
taxes. Exactly. So there's no way to really know.
But so let's talk about the populist moment.
Which is now running in reverse as fast as its legs will carry it.
Yeah, and I mean it's hard to even call it populist, I think. But there's an important part of your thesis that I want to problematize a bit, which is that that Trump's call to populism worked.
Sorry, Trump's call to populism worked.
Yeah. I mean, it obviously he's president, so on some level, I guess you have to say that it worked. But Hillary did win with voters voters making less than $50,000 a year, and also turnout for voters making less than $50,000 a year was lower in 2016 than it was in 2012,
which is a victory for Trump.
And so, one of the working theses about who stayed home would be the non-white working class.
That's right. No, but that's right. That's part of the appeal, or the design. Okay,
right.
Is that a lot of white working class voters? And by the way, we generally define.
Yeah, let's talk about what working class means.
Is not lower class.
Right.
It's not poor. It tends to be people in the middle class, but who can see their middle class status disintegrating.
Does it have like an actual definition? Because I'm always troubled by using the term because it doesn't have like a real definition, and also because
people who sell their labor. But there are sharp distinctions between working class and the professional class.
Right.
Where the professional class, their status is based on educational attainment.
Right.
Always. So working class jobs and people, no, that's not important. They might have gone to school, but that's not essential to who they are and what they do.
But for instance, if you look at educational attainment versus income for Trump voters, it actually the predictor is education more than income.
Yeah.
Because people
there you go.
Making more than however
income
much
is all over the map. So you will have
so it's like business owners who don't have a college education.
Yeah.
Self-employed people who may not have a 4-year degree.
Okay, so now you're talking small.
Those are the people that went for Trump.
Small business is going to be going for Trump in a huge way. By the way, and that is also contested terrain. Although the Democrats have just so completely dropped the ball. There was small business we think of as a pretty right-wing group, but there is no group in America that was angrier about the Wall Street bailouts than small business people because they never get that kind of treatment, And this is just absolutely infuriating to them, to watch these banks get. Anyhow,
let's go back
to
great
lost opportunity.
Right. So let's go back to the argument that Trump won by appealing to populist sentiment and working class sentiment.
Yeah.
He didn't actually win.
The popular vote.
The popular vote, which is one way to define populism. And he also didn't actually win people who were making less than $50,000 a year. And the turnout for people making less than $50,000 a year was low.
Yeah.
Probably because people...
The poor always go for, or are some of the most reliable Democratic voters there are.
Right.
But people, when you measure people by income, you're going to get groups like the handicapped, the elderly. You're going to get, my mom would probably be in that category that you just mentioned. You're going to have unemployed people. Right. You're going to have homeless people. Well, they don't generally vote, but you're going to have.
It's harder, and all those people are also people that are locked out by voter ID laws.
Homeless people are, yeah.
Well, no,
sure.
Also disabled people, elderly people without driver's license.
Yeah, no, that's right, and that's big surprise there, and that is one of the most reliable Democratic groups, and voter ID laws. Guess what? Are aimed at them.
Right.
No
so
question about it. But then you also have the people who stayed home.
Right.
Very interesting. This does tend to be a lot of working class people didn't vote, and that is, they weren't enthused by Hillary,
right.
And that's this is a huge part of the problem for the Democratic Party.
Just because I feel like one message that people are getting from you is that we need to take some pages from the Trump playbook.
Oh, I don't know if I go that far, but I mean, maybe from his style and everything. But I think the Democrats need to take some pages from their own damn playbook. Go back and look at how Democrats used to do this. It's just not that hard.
Right.
The funny thing is that the Democrats.
I just want to be super, super clear because like this is something that bothers me. Like in reading analyses of 2016 that talk about Democrats not taking advantage of working class messages, which is that you can't leave out race. You cannot leave out race. And I know you know this, but it's just because like racial resentment is a bigger resentment was a bigger predictor for Trump turnout than any other metric.
Yeah.
It is if you measure racial resentment.
Yeah. Is that different from other years, I wonder?
You know what? I have been assuming that it is, but I don't know. But it is the biggest predictor, not income, not
because one thing I noticed about Hillary, I don't know if you saw this, she's white. I don't know if
and
just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and also the other problem is with Hillary is that her message to voters, to people of color even, was, vote for me or else there'll be a racist in the White House.
Yeah.
Which is not a powerful message to people of color because
it's also did Trump the groups that Trump was specifically targeting, which is mainly Muslims and then I would say secondarily Mexicans, the two groups that he was most bigoted towards.
Right.
So a lot of your traditional Democratic voters. Well, where am I going?
Yeah, where are you going with that? Because I think he was pretty bigoted towards a lot of people.
No, of course he goes down the list of ethnic groups and is like insults them or is ham-handed towards every single one. It's absolutely inexcusable. But why did Hillary's message not work? Hillary's message was a very professional class message.
Yes.
The anti-discrimination thing was about executives who want to rise to the top. The famous glass ceiling thing. This means nothing to people who are actually toiling at
I guess the
workaday job.
Right. Well, the point I want to make one is that I've heard this. Like Joy Reid is a person that told me that for her, Hillary's message of vote for me or there'll be a racist in the White House, how like for black people that was like, yes, so like we've been having racists in the White House.
They've had that before.
Yeah, we've seen that before. And
they're not scared of that.
Was that she could have had that message, but needed to combine it with a economic message for working class people of all colors. Like that a working class message. And
that's always how Democrats used to do it. The thing is, Hillary didn't want to do that. And she came up with a million excuses for not doing that. I mean, crazy, dumb excuses for not doing that.
What do you mean by that?
You remember she, to some degree, convinced herself that would contradict her message about anti-discrimination. Remember what she said about Bernie Sanders? Do you remember this? That if breaking up Wall Street wouldn't end racism in America. It's like, yeah, that's right. It's a separate issue.
Well,
I mean, it has some relationship,
right?
But it's largely a separate issue. But she convinced herself that the two things were somehow at odds.
Yeah.
Which, of course, they never have been in the past. But by the way, this is the Democrat. I mean, this is a lot of people in the Democratic Party have persuaded themselves of that because the economic populism is, of course, inconvenient for them personally. Mm. They don't like it personally. Right. It doesn't appeal to them personally. They have friends who work on Wall Street. They have friends who work in Silicon Valley. And
it makes them uncomfortable. Also, Whereas, like, sort of a message about love Trump's hate.
Love Trump's. I'm sorry. Every time I hear that, you know what I think? By the way, and I have that button at home.
Did you buy it as a souvenir?
No, somebody gave it to me. But
okay.
I collect this stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't see you as a person that would be like,
wearing Kansas. Do you remember that crazy pastor? I shouldn't say that. That pastor. He's not crazy. He's dead now. The guy from
he's
Topeka,
definitely not crazy
The guy
anymore.
from Topeka who would say, God hates fags.
Yeah, I remember that.
this?
Yes. Yes.
And he had a saying that fascinated me. What was his name? I don't remember.
Oh, I just almost said it, but
anyhow,
yes.
He had a saying that
Fred Phelps.
Yeah. He had a saying that fascinated me at the time because it was so mean and so weird that our duty is to love God's hate.
Ooh.
Yeah. We don't understand God's hate, and it's beyond our ken as human beings, but we know it's God, and so we have to love God's
And we know it's hate. That's the part that I really...
Isn't that freaky?
Yeah, that is freaky.
But so every time someone says love Trump's hate, I'm like, do we have to love Trump's hate?
You see it as like a command.
No, I keep getting it confused with that slogan from
Because you know what? That actually, now you've said it, is
you're never going to be able to get that out of your mind.
No, and also that does describe Trump voters. Like they love Trump's hate.
Or do they disregard Trump's hate? I've talked to a lot of Trump voters, and a lot of them were obviously put off by
they were.
His remarks.
Especially
the groping business, that's like loathsome.
here in the Midwest. I mean, there's a lot of like good evangelicals and Catholics and Protestants who did not like that, and also who didn't like what he said about people of color and who definitely were put off by his mocking of the disabled reporter from the New York Times.
It's loathsome. It was absolutely loathsome. But it's amazing that the guy survived these things. But the question is, did they vote for him because of that stuff or in spite of that stuff?
Well, and can we ever really know?
Yeah, we'll never will.
Yeah. So we're going to take another break. I've been talking to Tom Frank, who we managed to stay somewhat on topic for a little while. That's awesome. And we'll see if we can do that again in the next segment.
You're listening to With Friends Like These with Anna Marie Cox.
Blue Apron is the #1 fresh ingredient and recipe delivery service in the country. Blue Apron's mission is to make incredible home cooking accessible to everyone. Blue Apron achieves this by supporting more sustainable food systems, setting the highest standards for ingredients, and building a community of home chefs. Cooking together builds strong family bonds, and it might save your marriage. Research shows that Blue Apron families cook nearly 3 times more often. Those who spend a lot at restaurants or high-end grocery chains can now spend under $10 a person for a delicious meal. Some of Blue Apron's featured upcoming meals include spinach and fresh mozzarella pizza with olives, bell peppers, and ricotta salata, and sweet and sour salmon with bok choy, carrot, and ginger fried rice. And that is, again, less than $10 per person per meal. Blue Apron delivers seasonal recipes along with pre-portioned ingredients to make delicious home-cooked meals. Choose from a variety of new recipes each week, or let Blue Apron's culinary team surprise you. Recipes are not repeated within a year, so you will never get bored. Customize your recipes each week based on your preferences. Blue Apron has several delivery options so you can choose what fits your needs. And there's no weekly commitment, so you only get deliveries when you want them. Each meal comes with a step-by-step, easy-to-follow recipe card and pre-portioned ingredients that can be prepared in 40 minutes or less. Blue Apron, a better way to cook.
You got a new tattoo on your arm?
All of these are new from when you met me. You knew me. I have tons. I have like 7.
Oh my God.
I know. I tell everybody to wait until you're at least 38 before you start getting tattoos. You're never going to regret them. Well, I mean, it's highly unlikely. Like, you'll know what you want. So
okay.
I'm actually thinking about getting a nevertheless she persisted tattoo.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But it does feel weird to get Mitch McConnell's words on your body forever. Like, that's the part I can't get out of my head, is that I will have Mitch McConnell's words on my body.
By the way,
forever.
I once saw him at Dulles Airport. He was, what's his wife's name?
Elaine Chao.
Elaine Chao. He was dropping off Elaine Chao at Dulles Airport.
Well, that's a very boring anecdote, Tom.
I know, it's not very good. I mean, as DC anecdotes go, that's really kind of lame. I mean, you've probably got better ones.
No, I
dozens.
Could fill a whole podcast.
Yeah. Sorry, mine are really, really lame like that. Like,
I saw
there was some member of Congress on the airplane I was on the other day.
And nothing happened at all. I just saw him.
Yeah.
He just was on my plane.
Yeah.
I actually want to talk to you about Jared and Ivanka.
I don't know these people. These are people I don't know.
They haven't been on your plane?
No.
I want to talk to them because I was thinking of you and your thesis about the professional class when I have been reading sort of. We have not yet gotten to the end of stories about how Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump might be moderating influences on Trump, right? Like, people still seem to think that is a thing you can write with some kind of possibility for it to be true.
Isn't that funny? It's all just speculation. We have no idea.
No, we have no idea. And in fact, what evidence we do have suggests that they are not moderating influences at all. But that impulse
not like that guy Bannon.
Yeah, right. Well, I think the impulse to think that they might be is actually based on class solidarity.
You think so? Because they are,
they're well groomed, and
people love Ivanka.
Yeah.
I mean, I know lots of people who admire her. And she's very tasteful, and
that's about it, right?
Well, taste is very important in this conversation, which is one of the reasons that people like the class that I'm describing, the liberal class,
liberal professional class.
Yeah,
or professional liberal class.
One of the things that you always hear about Trump is how tasteless he is, and that's technically right. Insofar as there is any kind of technicalities about taste, his taste is bad. That is quite true. But I don't think that's that really. And then by contrast, Ivanka's taste is quote unquote good.
Mm-hmm. Well, it has all the class and race signifiers that the professional liberal class has, right? Like she's reserved and she's like polished. Yeah. And
understated and and Jared did go to Harvard and,
right.
all that sort of
also
thing.
Reserved, polished, understated.
Yeah.
But those are the...
And Trump with his garish... By the way, one of my thrift store trends these days is buying Donald J. Trump's signature collection shirts and ties at the thrift. And they are garish and
What are you doing with them?
They sit in my closet. What, do you think I should build a bonfire from them?
Well, I don't know. Like, I don't think there is a good use for them. Like, send them back to China.
I really don't know what to do.
I don't know.
Yeah, or wherever it is they were made,
Like, I don't know. I donate them somewhere.
But the ties, you probably don't know this. The ties have metal in them. They have a little fake gold, brass or whatever, clasp on the back built into the tie. You probably didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Because that's so tasteful. And they have it's his name. That's what it is. It's his name on a little fake gold plate. Sewn into the back of the tie.
I was actually wondering if it was a clasp.
His name, not yours.
Right. I was wondering if that explained like why he would scotch tape the back of his ties.
Oh, so Trump wears his ties way too long. Have you ever noticed that?
Yes.
He ties it way. If you do that, the short end of it, the skinny end of the tie, is not going to make it all the way to the loop. Where it's supposed to go. So you'd have to scotch tape it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why that happens.
Yeah, but the larger question is, why the hell does he do that? Why doesn't he tie it like everyone else?
Which just brings us back to Jared and Ivanka, which is
the people who do tie their ties correctly.
They tie their ties correctly, and so therefore they must have the right opinions about race and
they must be a moderating influence, like you said.
Be. Yeah. And the other thing that people say,
isn't that funny that you can make those judgments based on taste alone? Or something like taste.
Well, obviously,
with Trump, we have more information, but
right, we have more. Well, we have information about all of them, which is to say, we know what Trump's actual policies are, and we don't need to use his vulgarity as a way to discount him, which is, I think, it was a mistake. I think that the media and Democrats made. In the race
to the perpetually offended, I mean, it's like what is the stereotype of the massively over offended, someone always taking offense all the time,
social justice warriors?
No. I mean, no, it's a stereotype deep in the culture. This is not something recent. I'm thinking Pharisees. This is that's what it reminded me of. But you're right that is like the singularly most useless topic to be this sort of a scolding schoolmarm. Like that's how you're going to beat him.
Right.
I mean, and Hillary, that was a big part of her effort. Remember those TV commercials that she was running, like basically nonstop, were all about how vulgar he was. By the way, one of them, if you look into it, the one where they show Trump using the F word, can we use it? Where Trump says, and they should fuck themselves. And that's bleeped out, of course, in the Hillary commercial. But you know who he's talking about?
Banks.
Companies that send manufacturing overseas.
Oh. Yeah.
And you know what? He's right. I hate those people.
They should go fuck themselves.
Yeah, they can go fuck themselves.
Yeah, but
they can.
Yes, but and maybe this is.
But here's Hillary pretending to like taking offense. That culture of offense taking is very limited in its appeal. Let me put it that way. That's not how you beat a guy like Trump. We now know.
Yeah, especially because for people who work for a living, like making appeals on taste grounds is in itself like kind of offensive.
Yep.
Like, I mean, even if they don't share,
exactly right.
Even if they don't share Trump's exact, values or tastes.
We're getting back to the essential thing, which is that liberalism is a class thing nowadays. It's specifically a thing of winners, of these affluent white collar professionals, and. We keep circling around this, and it's time we address this thing directly, because that is what it has become. That it has all these other.
And you mean that culturally, not in the podcast, because we've been talking about the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yes, as a culture.
Right. Okay.
But
I thought you were.
There are lots. There are obviously millions of other people who vote for the Democratic Party and all the rest of it, but they come second. The professionals come first, always. And
right.
They're the ones that make the commercials. They're the ones that decide on the policies. They're the ones that, bail out the Wall Street banks. And they're the ones that convince us that that's the only possible way to go forward, is that you had no choice,
Right. And I want to make sure
it is a class party, and it's a class ideology. And once you understand that, everything else about modern liberalism, all its failures, all of its like what you've just been describing, all of this suddenly makes sense. It snaps into focus, is what I find.
And also, I mean, I really don't want to leave like race out of this part of the discussion, because I think it also, that focus on the professional class also leaves out activists of color too, right? I mean, because that was like something that people, like, I think good liberals are offended by things like Black Lives Matter. They wish that people would not make so much...
Offended by Black Lives Matter?
Offended, but I think they're offended by like harsh tactics.
Oh, okay. So I was,
like,
by the way, so do you remember I got arrested when we were at Chicago?
Yes, I do remember that.
And that was sort of another turning point for me. And I'm very sympathetic to Black Lives Matter. I haven't gone to any protests, but damn, I wish I had, because police brutality is something I absolutely despise.
Well, yes. I mean, I think that people can say that, but I think that I'm just thinking about, like, Hillary being interrupted by protesters. I'm thinking about like the tactics that sometimes people use.
Yeah.
Well,
people make tactical mistakes all the time. Yes,
right.
That is true. That is true.
Right. And I think that this. Refusing to appeal to true working class, like, leaves out everyone, not just like white working class.
No.
It leaves out.
Of course, but Hillary had a problem with the black working class too. You mentioned it earlier. They didn't show up.
Right.
They didn't vote.
Right.
And that's just as damaging as, well, almost as damaging as if they had gone over to the Republican Party.
Right.
And you can't blame that on them. They were not inspired. Mm-hmm. They felt like there was nothing in this race for them. Mm-hmm. And that's not their own fault. You can't say, well, you weren't paying close enough attention. No, it's the candidate's responsibility to make that crystal clear. The way you appeal to working class people is with economic issues, workplace issues, issues about the middle class. And these are traditionally, when I say traditionally, I now mean 50 years ago. This is what the Democratic Party was really, really good at. And it is so lost. It's so gone. I think of your own Hubert Humphrey here in, Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Oh, God.
Yeah.
The blood of the liberals. I know, it's so sad.
I want to actually come back to a question when I went to your reading the other night. Someone asked you, which was that, and I started off with this, but we didn't drill down very deeply. And I want to attempt to do that now, which is what makes you not a member of this class that you're critiquing? And you said in the answer, you said, right, but you said in your answer, I don't like to talk about the personal part of this. So now
you're going to ask me about that.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Well, part of it was personal frustration. So I got a PhD in history and got out of history school, and there were no more tenure track jobs for PhDs had largely dried up. I mean, there's a few every year, but not very many. And so there was a whole bunch of us getting out of graduate school about this time, and not just in history, all the humanities, a lot of the social sciences, where we had to go work as adjuncts. And this is, you've read about this. You've written about this. This is your subject.
Yes, I have.
The kind of...
and that's also the reason why I dropped out of grad school.
And you did the same thing. So I didn't. I finished. I went ahead and finished. But this is massively frustrating. And you discover that you work at a wage that's less than the minimum wage. By the way, somebody emailed me something a while ago. It was I forget what it was. It was some kind of boilerplate, but in the boilerplate they were listing low-wage occupations who would benefit from some program or other, and they were listing things like fast food workers and this and that. And then one of the occupations that was listed was college instructors.
Yeah,
it's just now we just take it for granted that is a low-wage occupation,
mm-hmm.
and you get a PhD to teach college. It takes decades. I was in school for 25 years. And got that PhD. And then you come out and it's like, I'm a low-wage worker now? So that's a shocking thing, and that startles you, and that shakes up your worldview. And then the other thing that happened, of course, is, look, even though I don't teach at a university anymore and never, I'm not part of that world, I'm still an intellectual. I still think of myself as an intellectual. I read books, I write things. I deal with ideas. Mm-hmm. I argue about ideas. Look at what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. And once you start examining, and we don't have enough time to really talk about how I got interested in professionalism as a subject, but it's in What's the Matter with Kansas. The sort of germ of it started in What's the Matter with Kansas. But once you get interested in that, so then I went out and I'm reading like the sociology of professionalism, and Barbara Ehrenreich, by the way, used to write about this all the time. And you suddenly discover that this whole world that you aspired to and that you took as being the last word in rectitude in all sorts of different ways, like not just right in academic terms and scholarly terms, but right in taste terms, and these are the rightful rulers of the world. You suddenly realize that professionalism has its own pathologies, that this way of life has all kinds of things wrong with it, this way of life that we admire and that you and I wanted to be, that it has all sorts of things wrong with it. And these things are going totally unquestioned because, of course, I just knocked into the microphone.
You're
getting animated.
Exuberant.
Because the people at the top, the professionals at the top, are not interested in asking those questions. And if you're like me, and you see like this really, really interesting line of reasoning and line of inquiry that no one wants to talk about, you're going to take that road.
Yeah.
And that's where, so in some ways, I think I am being true to my calling as an intellectual by insisting on this very difficult and I think for some people very painful line of inquiry. And by the way, which brings us back to something that I said last night. Look, I write in a degraded form. I write political books. They sell. But I have real ideas in there, and all the stuff about the professional class, liberal culture, everything that we've been talking about. That is a serious intellectual subject. And yes, I frame it in a work about politics and about the Democrats and Republicans. And that's because that's how I do everything.
And that's also how something sells too. I mean, if you wrote a book
and I
about
make a living.
professionalism,
I don't write these things
the history
deliberately.
of professionalism, it probably
just take a guess here. It probably would not do so well.
Yeah.
But you couch it in terms of liberals versus conservatives, R's versus D's. It suddenly is. Whoa, it becomes something very topical and very urgent. And actually, but here's the thing, Anna. This is not being discussed, okay? Even after Trump. This book has been out for a year, and it's catching on now. By the way, I've been going all over the world. That people talk about it in other countries. But in this country, this is... I said when I started this subject, hey, look, here is a way of analyzing class in America and politics in America that seems both very true and yet which no one is talking about, and they're still not talking about it. This is fascinating.
And I also wanted to point out, though, that your sort of journey out of grad school and becoming aware of the professional class and seeing it as a not discussed subject and it having real structural ramifications in, academia, for one, also had real world impacts on policy that affected everyone's lives.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the thing that I feel like I saw in your work and also came to see myself, which is that the professionalization of the intellectual class, what that led to was like the fucking third way. Right?
Yes, exactly. This has been enormously consequential in a disastrous way.
Right. It led to welfare reform.
The
professionalization.
NAFTA.
Yep.
NAFTA is like he's listening to professional economists and not to labor unions. And he's like, you don't have PhDs. And guess what? They turned out to be right about that. Yeah. Or the economists turned out to be wrong.
Right.
And or you look at the professionalization of journalism, by the way, a fascinating thing, because journalism is both ultra professionalized at the top level, right. Washington Post, New York Times, and is collapsing everywhere else.
And ultra high paid at the top level.
Yes.
People don't realize that. There's this there's an incredibly two-tiered system that reflects income inequality in the rest of America in journalism, which is that the people at the very top make six figures or more.
I know about this firsthand.
Right. And
I used to be one of them.
Right. And then the people who are not name brands that you have heard of before make very little money. And then how that shapes...
like the Kansas City Star might as well disappear. And
it shapes coverage, not just in the way that it closes bureaus and closes coverage of things like labor,
but identify with the administration. So these guys look at Hillary Clinton, and by the way, they look at Trump, and they're like, this man is incredibly obnoxious. We can't understand why anyone would vote for him. Not a single paper in this country, or maybe one or two, endorses the guy. Yeah. Hillary Clinton, they look at, and they can't see how anyone could dislike Hillary Clinton. Their love for her, their passion for her was without reservation because she is one of them, a peer. And that's really interesting. But this is all over the place. The bank bailouts, and then Obama refusing to, do the sort of Franklin Roosevelt thing on Wall Street, or Obama hanging around with Mark Zuckerberg. Obama doing favors for Big Pharma.
Richard Branson. I mean, I love those
pictures.
Well,
Obamacare, where Big Pharma is like, written into it that they get whatever they want out of this. It's like, why? Mm-hmm. Why do that incredible favor for these people? Because they are his people, professional class. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, the class interpretation explains a lot. But it is very uncomfortable for the people who are the gatekeepers to the media in this country.
I will ask you one last question. So you live in D.C.
You're going to ask about Australia?
No.
How was the beer? Did you meet any kangaroos? Why, yes, I did. They were cute.
You live in D.C. You've referenced that many times. I used to live in D.C. too. We knew each other in D.C. What's that like for you? Like, do you just walk around angry all the time?
Well, yeah. How do you think I write this stuff? Look, as I grow older, you've said it already, I am mellowing. I don't throw my pages on the floor anymore. The big obstacle or pitfall for me is contentment. That I can't, if I get too happy, and I have, by the way, a beautiful life, and I have a beautiful family, and we live in a wonderful house in a nice neighborhood, and I grow flowers.
Says true. I have met your lovely family.
Yes, and I grow beautiful flowers in the yard, but the huge danger for me is becoming complacent and happy, and I have to be. I have things that I do to stir myself up and make myself mad.
Do tell.
Well, some of them just come naturally. I'll just mention one the other day. Being in an airport, you talk about the, professional class assumptions just in your face. It's like, diamond class million milers may board at your leisure. And it's just like, but everything about airports drives me up the wall. It's like you're in a propaganda chamber for, management theory, all the posters on the wall and people. I'm sorry. I need to have lunch. My words are disappearing. They're just evaporating here. I don't know what you're doing to me, Anna, but I'm losing my vocabulary by the second.
Yeah, that's the point of the whole show. We have to talk until people start to not make sense.
They just faint,
and then it works. It's a tactic that works. Do you have an idea? Do you ever feel yourself getting too content?
Of course, it happens. Like I said, I have a beautiful family and a nice home and a garden, and my life is should be a very happy one, and that is a professional risk for me. And so I have to take steps. I have to take measures to ensure that I'm irritated. Otherwise, I wouldn't write. What am I going to do? Write like poems?
This I'm reminded why
songs of contentment.
I'm reminded of why we are friends. Actually, in this. Because I don't think of it quite as systematically as you do. I don't think of it as my job depends on staying angry. I've been doing this for long enough that I know it's there. That, rage and dissatisfaction is within me. But I do watch Fox every day. So that'll do it. That'll do it. Yeah. And I fly a lot, but I'm now platinum medallion. So,
oh no, sorry, did I step on your toes there? Your professional class toes.
But the means of production do belong to the people. So I just walk through with my fist raised. I walk through the gate with my fist raised, and that makes
I did go and get TSA pre-check, by the way.
Traitor, last traitor. All right, we're gonna wrap it up. Tom, thank you for coming. I really
it was my pleasure, and I love being here in Minneapolis.
It's a lovely city. Don't tell too many people. We want to keep it,
on the down low.
That's the reason why the cold weather is actually awesome, and it just keeps all the people that aren't strong enough to take it out. But thank you, Tom. Your book, Listen Liberal, incredibly relevant to this moment. I will have to check in with you again sometime.
You got it, man. Anytime.
All right. And that's it for the show. Just want to thank you for listening again. If you enjoyed this episode or other episodes, or even if you didn't really enjoy it, but you just want to do me a solid, you could rate and review this podcast on iTunes or wherever it is you get your podcast. You can also tell your friends about it. You can show them how to use podcasts, because it turns out that that's something that not a lot of people actually know how to do. When Tom was in the studio, one of the first things he asked me was so how do you listen to podcasts? And I was actually going to use that moment as a teachable, moment, and maybe walk him through it. But I realized that would be a bad use of the audience's time, since you are listening to a podcast, which again, I want to thank you for doing. If you have feedback on the show, you can deliver it via Twitter to @crooked_friends, or you can send an email to withfriendslikepod@gmail.com. Again, that's withfriendslikepod@gmail.com. We've been getting lots of really interesting comments and questions. We will be doing another episode with listener-submitted queries about relationships and politics soon, I promise. Just keep listening. We drop every Friday. See you next week.